uh, a report to the committee to further give clarity on your questions and as well as on the slides. Kasi po, yun nga, there are, we sent, I know we sent the data to your office as well, but we will provide the narrative and the analysis na lang po, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please. Because if I'm looking at your presentation, after this, actually, you discussed about the other researches that pointed to uh, mother tongue as a way forward. So my my take on this presentation is we have to continue with mother tongue, but we're trying to now analyze and figure out what are the basis for that direction, no? So, and one of the basis of your recommendation or your direction is these 2 points, no? And but we cannot make sense out of these 2 points, no? So, Senator Pia, anything you want to add?
Yes, I think so. I took shots of some of the slide presentations also where I wanted to get further information. Yeah, I took note that it was mentioned, similar to what I was saying earlier, Mr. Chairman, if you recall, when we started the hearing, I was saying that just from my own experience going around the country, meeting different families, parents, children, that many students, learners in a certain area may not even have that mother tongue in that area, no? Like their parents might have decided to raise their family in Luzon, but both parents are Bisaya or whatever else. No, I mentioned that. And this last presentation said exactly what I observed. No, di ba may presentation dyan na in fact the reality is in many schools you have learners of different where their mother tongue is different from what is being taught. And that's always been my concern. And I'm really appreciative, Mr. Chairman, of this hearing because these issues are coming out. I don't necessarily agree with the conclusion, but I am very willing to listen. But like you, it seems that we're parang may nauungkat tayong mga realities that may not necessarily point to the conclusion that still is being or the recommendations that are still being made, di ba? Kasi kung sinabi earlier in the presentation na the mother tongue program is based on the assumption that there is one mother tongue. Pero ngayon in this presentation sinabi nga na the reality is maraming in a class na hindi yun ang mother tongue nila and that hasn't been discussed further. So what nga? Well, then we go to the lingua franca. Diba? So the presentation did not want to say na, I don't know, I just feel like it was left kind of open-ended or let's just still pursue. Pero yung let's just pursue, similar yung appreciation ko nun as what I gathered to be your appreciation, Mr. Chairman, na parang kulang yata tayo sa data to say that we will pursue that direction nga. So that's my observation. It's just an observation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Pia. Yeah, the same with me. And I know that DepEd has made some policy changes on removing or will be removing mother tongue as a subject. But we also want to, aside from learning the logic for that policy change, we also want to be appraised on the efficacy as well as the implementation of the mother tongue through research, impact studies, as well as data gathering. So yun po yung punto po ng hearing na ito. No, we don't have any, personally, I don't have any policy recommendation yet, but I want to learn, I want to see data, and I want to critique as much as possible so that we can elicit a very robust discussion. I'll share a slide, Senator P, if you're with your permission, because we're trying to find proxies, no? In the absence of an impact study, we're trying to find proxies on the effects of mother tongue to numeracy and science. No, and the only study that we can find is to compare the team study between 2003. This is where when the bilingual um, method was used during key stage one. And then we also compared the 2019 team study when the mother tongue was already implemented. So if you look at the scores between the bilingual time, no, in 2003 compared to the mother tongue time, which is 2019, you see a dip in the scores. And we have to remember that TIMS was given or is being given to grade 4 students. So these are students who presumably went through the mother tongue during kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3, and then transition to English in grade 4. And you can see a dip in scores, no? A large dip in scores for math and science. And if you go through TIMS, actually it has rich information. Tinanong yung mga bata, are they confident with their math? No? And we'll show you a slide that, hindi yan, isa pa. If you compare the 2003 and 2019, again, no, bilingual and mother tongue, you can see that the level of confidence of students dipped from 34% to 8% in terms of math. And the non-confident, hindi sila confident, went up from 12% to 36%. Of course, it can be argued that from 2003 to 2019, there were many policy changes. There were also other factors. But again, this is just our initial study that we tried to do internally in the absence of an impact study. But we tried to also filter out some of the major policy changes that were implemented during between the years 2003 to 2019. Of course, there were a lot, no? From 10 years, naging 12 years, curriculum approach from disciplinary to spiral progression. But one of the major policy changes between those years is the move from bilingual to multilingual. So, and you can see, kasi nga, what we are also hearing from the ground is the students who are taught in their mother tongue in math and science, when they go to grade 4 and they're now suddenly taught in English, there's that complication that the student experiences. And my interpretation of this data is the student, because of that complication, becomes unsure, no, or becomes not confident of their math skills. So ito po yung nakuha namin from the TIMS data. I just want to ask DepEd if they have looked at this and if they have any comment to this information. We're willing to be validated and we're willing to be disputed. Again, wala kasing formal na study, so we had to make do of what we can. And we're willing to be disputed and corrected with our interpretation of this data. So I want to ask DepEd, and then later on I want to ask ACTRC on their comments regarding our findings. So, DepEd, if you have any comments. Or you need time to analyze this data. May I ask ACTRC for now? What are their comments? Or si DepEd, Dr. Ariola, I think she raised her hands. What's your comment on this, Director Ariola?
Okay. Pero hindi ako naririnig.
Hindi namin kayo
Wala
naririnig.
akong audio. I think I've got a problem. So, oo nga, pero wala eh.
There, I can hear you now.
I'm not heard.
Director, I can hear you.
Oo nga,
Director
nandito
Ariola?
ako, pero hindi ako naririnig. Yes, ma'am. I think I've got a...
Director Ariola, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay. Yes, Mr. Chair. May we request that we look at these figures further?
Yes, Director, just take a look at these teams. No, we benchmarked it. Again, there's no, I have to keep on repeating this. There's no impact study, so we're trying to make a sense out of it, out of
Really have
existing data.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and we really have to take a look whether or not it's the factor that affects this particular result is the language used by the learners. Thank you.
Thank you. May I request Dr. Therese, ACTRC, to give their comments?
All right. So I think more familiar than me on Teams would be Dr. Ferido. And then I'll just give my comments in a bit. Ma'am Marlene.
Okay, good afternoon, sir.
Dr. Frida, good afternoon.
Yes, in 2003, I was still connected with the UP National Institute for Science and Math Education Development, and we help DOST Science Education Institute administer Teams 2003. I also remember that we helped in the development of the report. Now, of course, yes, this is part, the graph you showed is in terms of the confidence of the students. And I'd like to also share what I shared in our previous meeting, that let me just check my data. Uh, in one of the studies that ACRC did regarding the readiness of students, grade 4 and grade 6 students for science and math curriculum. If you remember, I mentioned that the grade 4 students, upon their entry in grade 4, at the beginning of the school year, 95.5% of our almost 900 samples from different regions were ready, meaning to say they were ready, they were with the prerequisite concepts and skills and ready to engage with grade 4 curriculum. That was in math, because when they went to, or when the grade 6 students were assessed for readiness, the readiness was very low already. It was on only 41%. So what I'm trying to point out is at grade 4, this group of students in 2018 just went through the MTB MLE program. But of course, we did not delve into, what language did you use, etc., because the language of assessment that we use was English. All right. So what I'm saying is, maybe we don't have data on that. That the prerequisite skills they got from K to 3 were sufficient to help them reach that readiness in grade 4, in math only. So that's it. Now, if we backtrack, because there was a question raised by Dr. Fermin earlier. And one of his questions said, I think number 5, if we access ILSAs in Filipino, what would have been the difference? I remember way back in 1999, there was a Teams repeat where we translated all the questions, but that's in grade 8, to Filipino and administered it to a good number of students in many regions through the Department of Science and Technology. Now, the results on the English and on the translated questions were not different at all. So we were trying to hypothesize that it's not only the language of assessment that they had problems, it's the understanding of the concepts in math and in science. That's why earlier I said we've got to look also at the disciplinary literacy that slowly is being introduced in science and mathematics and even in the social sciences. It's not just basic literacy. So that's all that I have for the comments. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Dr. Frido. And maybe also request from ACTRC. I know that you are one of the leading research groups here in our country to take a look, just to compare, no, the 2003 and 2019 TIMS. Because again, the absence of an impact study, I think this is a logical proxy,
Yeah.
if it's possible. And then we're willing also to discuss with you your findings. These are just our internal analysis, and again, we're willing to uh, we're willing that our findings be validated, so that we'll have a much more robust discussion on this
Yeah.
topic.
Sir, I think I can go back and check the reports, the complete report for Teams 2003, so that I can also give a better perspective and not just what I can remember.
But Dr. Frido, but how come the confidence level of our students dipped, no,
Ah.
tremendously
I'm
in
sorry,
math?
sir, but
In math,
yeah, yeah, in math.
from 34% confident, very confident, to 8%, and
Yeah,
then the non-confident from 12% to 36%.
maybe we need to look also at the uh, portions of the curriculum that were, the content domain and the cognitive domains of teams in 2003 versus in 2019. So we need to check those also if they are similar. Yeah. Really, the assessment, the way our students are assessed matter a lot. I mean, the assessment happening in the classroom is so much different from what they encounter in ILSAS. And that's a hump, or a gap that they need to reckon with. Yeah. And that could contribute also to confidence level. But I'm not sure what
Yeah.
confidence level really entail, I mean, with respect to the data.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. But my thoughts on this, because I also have gone around the country, is and the feedback of grade 4 students being ready. In fact, the anecdotal feedback I get from teachers is they need 1 quarter for the students to be ready, depending on the student's capability. But what I'm getting is they need 1 quarter for grade 4 students to be ready for science and math. That's what I'm getting. And there's a time for students, because of the difference in language. There's a gap that the students need to fill in order to uh, to respond to the English MOI being used in grade 4. So I'm just correlating that anecdote to this data. Of course, I don't have that direct connection, but again, no, these are things that we are putting together from our own research and consultation. No? So,
Okay.
yep, Dr. Bustos.
So I just wanted to add that I guess this is indicative that our students have not really mastered the language of instruction, which is why when that language of instruction is used in assessment, they do not perform well. However, if you ask, for example, we as a country have a choice in terms of what language to use for these assessments. And the usual response that I would get from colleagues in the department would be, we use English because that is the declared medium of instruction for that particular subject, for that particular grade level. Unfortunately, for example, if you take the test in grade 4 and you would take that test in English, you would have had just a few years of English instruction to prepare you for it. But that doesn't mean that we, for example, eradicate, for example, the use of mother tongue, because precisely that was the reason why mother tongue was introduced, because we were seeing that our students, when tested using a foreign language such as English, they were not performing well. And so we wanted to make sure that they understood those concepts well. We now know, and based on the different research, that the way MTBMLE was implemented was really very difficult and different in many places. And so I think this is one area that we really need to look more into. But again, we have made decisions as a country to take the tests in English, knowing our language situation. And I get and that could have been averted because, for example, like for CPLM, you could even take it not just in your national language, but it could be taken in other languages given the context of the country. And I think these are things that were not were that were not taken into consideration when we decided to take those tests in English. That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Therese. So many things that we can talk about and discuss, and truly, it's our direction here in the committee is to gather as much information, feedback, and data, to help us come up with a policy recommendation on mother tongue, because we're also talking to a lot of practitioners and hearing different feedbacks from them. So for the last comment is Dr. Fermin, and then we'll suspend this hearing, and then we'll go back again for another session, especially after receiving the materials from DepEd and from our other resource persons. Dr. Fermin, you have the last comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the input that I will give has something to do with two other important movements happening within the DepEd that led to the TIMS of 2003, where the bilingual education policy was still in place. So it might be good, Mr. Chair, for our DepEd colleagues who will be looking into further granular details about the comparison that you have shown, which I think is an important part of our conversation. Um, the DepEd folks can recall that there was a Philippine English language teaching project, or PELT, that took place from 1995 to May 2001, which was managed primarily by the Ateneo Center for English Language Teaching, where the direction was to enhance the competency of teachers in English, particularly those teaching the content areas, including mathematics and science. And then in 2002, if you recall, we did the basic education curriculum, the RBEC. And at that time, one of the directions was to enhance discipline based knowledge. But also around that time, from 1999 to 2003, the late brother Andrew Gonzalez spearheaded the Lingua Franca Education Project, LFAP, which was designed towards ensuring that the regional languages were really used to further appreciation and understanding of even the content areas. So, what I'm saying, Mr. Chair, is that I think we should also look into some of the antecedents that impacted on the way things are being taught and assessed at that time and compare them to the actual conditions that led to the performance of our learners and, of course, ultimately our teachers in 2019 for the teams. Just some things that I think we also need to be mindful of because that will help us understand what kind of conditions were present when the data points that you showed were actually sensitive to. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for those reminders, Dr. Fermin. Well, we've been here for 5 hours, and thank you very much to everyone. It was really, truly insightful, and I learned a lot today. Senator Pia, are you still there for any last comments?
Yes, I'm still here. I also want to thank Dr. Fermin for that. No, I am a big believer of the importance of looking at the context and the historical situation that existed at the time we were analyzing data. So when Dr. Fermin mentioned that at the time lingua franca program was introduced, I think we really have to have a deeper understanding of all that because even I, in my limited experience in the Senate, whether it's education policy, health policy, it really helps that I have an understanding of what policies were in place, what changed. So this has been very helpful. I'd like to thank all the resource persons also, Mr. Chairman. But I'd also like to very quickly just go back to one point that was mentioned in the last presentation. There was a slide on gender and it showed how our boys are lagging behind the girls. Do you recall that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, yes. It was,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. From
Anyway,
AC.
on that slide and for another time, not now, that is a very important issue, something that I really wanted to emphasize that we should not uh, brush aside. And I know not that anyone is brushing it aside, but I wanted to really point that out because remember how years ago the goal really around the world, and it still is the goal in many parts of the world, is to ensure that girls are in school, di ba? That is the gender bias, that the girls, that is where the gender inequality lies, that many girls stayed home to do housework and didn't get a chance to go to school. And it still remains to be an SDG in many parts of the world. But in our case, for the last almost a decade, I think, our data shows that girls are in school, that they're staying in school, and even in higher education, Mr. Chairman, you'll recall we have lots of data that shows that they're excelling in med school, in law school. In fact, in the oath taking I attended of my daughter for architecture, they said it's the first time in history that there are more women board passers, and oath takers. So I raise this, Mr. Chairman, because again, as we explore, although this particular hearing is about mother tongue, lingua franca, proficiency in English, proficiency in school, and all that, that is a valid concern about the boys being left behind, Mr. Chairman. So let's take that up in another case, or let's always consider that in the context of the discussions. I don't know if there is really a valid. Remember, I'm sure you've also heard this. Our experts here have heard. I'm sure the data, not the data, but studies saying that boys tend to be better at this, girls tend to be better at this. I don't even know if those are still valid, but the point remains now that girls have had the opportunity to stay in school, at least in our country, and it's also being seen in other countries. It's the boys that are getting left behind, and we don't want that to happen, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'd like to join you in thanking our resource persons for staying with us all this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Pia. And indeed, one of the things that we can be proud of with our country is we always score very high in the Gender Equality Index. I think we're top 3 or top 5, top 3. If correct me if I'm wrong, Senator Pia, but we're always on top of that index. So thank you again very much to our resource persons, of course, to Dr. Casanova, to Mr. Rodriguez, and to Mr. Marin, who is here with us physically. Maraming salamat for staying with us and sharing your insights with us. So we'll suspend this hearing and we'll see you later on. Thank you.